Hello, good morning, folks. My name is Tyler Benster. I'm here with Kadena Eco, and we are about to launch Campfire Community Call number 17 featuring Nik and Thomas. We're going to talk all things DeFi, answer questions that people may have, and hopefully have a really great discussion here. So I'm going to bring Nik and Thomas up onto the screen. Hello, Nik. Hello, Thomas. How are you guys doing?
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Evening.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. So, as usual, we'll start off with a couple updates, and then we'll jump into whatever topics Nik and Thomas want to discuss, and opening it up to live questions. So, briefly, on the Kadena update side of things, we have a new blog post that covers a lot more about Internet of Things, as well as Crank and how Crank is bringing the internet to the physical world with IoT devices, and how Kadena is empowering this behind the scenes. So that's pretty sweet. You should definitely check out the link below to learn all the cool details about that. And Crank has been responsible for a lot of transaction volume over the last few months on Canadian network. So if you want to understand what that's all about and what that's powering, definitely check out that Medium post. You'll likely learn a lot. Secondly, the KDAExplorer.com website has a bunch of new updates, including a light mode and, excitingly, an NFT lightbox view. So that is pretty sweet. Definitely go check that out. Some new features, some new ways to interact and explore what's happening in the ecosystem. Next up, for those that were here on Monday, you already got the early scoop on this, but the Charka development tutorial with Thomas is out. So great resource for folks that want to level up their Pact game and start becoming intermediate to advanced Web3 programmer. Really great content there. And if you want to follow along that video with the GitHub repo out, that may be the most interactive way to go through it and to help accelerate your learning. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have the June 22nd Builders Call that is upcoming. And we have a link where you can sign up for that if you'd like. So this is a call where Kadena's developers and builder community come together to provide updates, tackle obstacles, and improve the developer experience on Kadena. Simply put, build together. So these calls have been really popular in the past. I know they've gotten thousands of views, and there's a lot of attendees on the calls. And so you should definitely come check it out. Great opportunity to get a little closer to the engineering team and understand where things are going in terms of technical direction, and as well as provide feedback and ask questions and share knowledge. So great resource for the builders out there in the audience. So that's all the updates I got. And without further ado, we're going to jump in. So I think maybe it would be helpful. Nik, it's the first time we've had you on the stream. So this is really exciting. Would love to just get a quick intro. Nik, would you mind sharing a little bit about what you're up to on the BD team and your background in DeFi?
Sure thing. I mean, I had a TradFi background before getting into DeFi, and did a bit of work kind of in the UK with some early stage startups, fintechs, ad techs, etc., some other bits and pieces before taking the plunge and going full-time Web3. I have previously worked at a DEX. I've worked with a couple of people as well on some kind of mini projects, one of them that did become a very large blockchain eventually. And within the BD team for Kadena, covering DeFi and a few other bits and pieces as well. So yeah, look, absolutely great to be here. I'm a big fan. I've watched all previous 16 episodes.
Yes. That's amazing. And Thomas, I know we just had you on the stream on Monday. I gave you a brief introduction, but maybe I'll turn over to you to give a couple of quick words about yourself and your interest in Web3 and crypto.
Yeah, I'm not primarily a blockchain developer. I actually work in language design and cybersecurity, but I became interested in kind of the Web3 world, but specifically Kadena, through Tyler told me about this in the first place. He said that you should check out what's going on here. It's a scalable high throughput solution, so you're not paying $40 in fees every time you're trying to do something. And I was especially interested in Pact, the programming language. It's a super cool, minimal, secure language, introducing a lot of features that you don't typically find in blockchain environments, like formal verification. And I just got really fascinated with the language. I wanted to start building, taking advantage of blockchain technology, understanding more what it's about. And now I've been involved for about a year. I mostly work on a project called Real World Pact, which is a series of projects beginning from super beginner, like I don't know anything, to fairly advanced projects that are real world applications running, in this case, on chain web. So on Monday, yeah, when we spoke, that was about a compound finance clone called Sharka Lending, which is fully functioning. It's not deployed because it's not an actual product. You can't use it. But if I did deploy it, you could use it. It is a fully functioning thing. So I mostly build educational resources in the community.
Awesome.
That's my spiel. Yeah.
So we have a pretty cool, I think, dual perspective here. We have Nik with a sort of more business perspective, this on the floor, talking with lots of projects, looking at what's going on in the broader crypto space and working hard to help projects grow on Kadena and onboarding more and more DeFi onto Kadena. And we have Thomas, who is a very low-level understanding of how to build out some really interesting DeFi primitives like a lending platform on chain web. So have a wealth of knowledge here, both from the business and the technical side. And so I think it's going to be a really, really interesting campfire, and definitely want to make this community driven as much as possible. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll try and get to as many questions as possible, whether they're specific questions about Kadena, broader questions about crypto, more theoretical discussions. Happy to go into all these realms. I've been asked to add the disclaimer that nothing we discuss will be financial advice. I've also looked at some legalese online, and apparently that provides very little legal protection. But anyway, we'll just say that it's sort of implicit in all of these discussions that we're not giving financial advice, but I'll mention that here. Okay, I see a couple questions coming in. This is kind of an interesting one from Web3, the titular asker. How close are we to having biometric? So I understand. So he says 2DFA. I understand two-factor authentication. I don't know. I don't know if the 2DFA means anything to anyone. Otherwise, I'll give it a quick Google. But maybe we could. I don't know if this two-way deterministic finite automaton. I don't think that's what he means. Let's just take it as two-factor authentication biometric. So I imagine this could be useful if you wanted to, for example, gate a account that you have funds in, and you say, hey, I only want this account to be able to send funds if they both sign it with a private key and have some biometric sign off on it. So curious if anyone has some thoughts on it. Otherwise, I can kind of jump in with some musings.
I mean, look, from my perspective, and just working, within BD and the collaboration across the kind of dev teams, as I understand it, this is going to be a key point and key factor within the smart contract wallet designs and build outs that we're working on. So, look, the question, how close, how long is a piece of string, but it's forefront at the minds of the devs that are working on the smart contract wallet from my side, unless otherwise, Tyler.
No, I was going to say, so I'm not privy to some of the wallet development details, but on some level, one can imagine a biometric two-factor authentication, or I guess the D being decentralized, perhaps, as being a form of a multi-sig. And so if you needed to sign an account with two different signatures, and you had one signature in a wallet, say on your computer in a Chrome extension or whatever, and then you had a second signature that was in a secure enclave on your iPhone protected by Face ID, that you could kind of imagine, basically from the blockchain perspective, it might simply be a multi-sig. But where it's interesting is maybe in the client perspective, where someone is developing an application that actually keeps that key on a secure enclave on a chip, protected by some biometric feature. So that's sort of a off-the-cuff reaction to it, where I think it's definitely built-in Kadena protocol. It's possible, and it's actually more of a iOS or Android programming challenge than anything.
Yeah. I mean, look, one other interesting point that kind of comes out of this question is, and this is something that I was surprised about when I joined Kadena, is that, you know, the Kadena team not only really, really strong on obviously software development, but also have really great hardware expertise internally. So you know, like these types of questions are extremely relevant for, you know, specifically Kadena because of that crossover between, you know, really software and hardware, which maybe on kind of proof of stake chains you wouldn't necessarily get.
Yep. No, I think that's an astute point and super interesting. All right, let's jump to a next question here. Let's see here. I see some comments have flown in and made me lose my place, but Halvan from Bernardo PR. Bridge has been publicized for more than a year now, and Lago was a disaster. What can we expect? A fully decentralized EVM bridge. So I'll say that bridges are one of the most complicated and difficult and attackable from a code surface area perspective, pieces of code in the Web3 space, right? Because you're implementing something in two different languages, they're running on potentially two different ledgers, and you have to make sure that there's no attack available on either side. And there's obviously historically been a huge number of attacks on bridges throughout. And so this has been something where we obviously want a third-party team to operate a bridge. Kadena and Kadena core team and Kadena Eco are expert on Chainweb, and Pact aren't expert on every blockchain in existence. But it's a huge BD priority, and there's some deals that are in the works around getting bridges launched. But as for a fully decentralized EVM bridge, I don't have an answer for you in terms of a date or a timeline or anything, but certainly thinking about getting Pact running everywhere, Pact as a layer 2, Pact, you know, running layer 2 on top of Kadena, Pact running on top of layer 2 on top of EVM. There's a lot of, I think, excitement around what folks are working on to build out some of these features and visions, and trying to bring some of these advantages and the safety of Pact onto other blockchains is going to help accelerate adoption of bridges and make those safer, so that you don't have the same attack surface profile as if you have some Solidity code here, some Pact code there, some Rust code there. Yeah, I think it's a tough but fair question, and I think it's an active area of work both on developers and BD side. And yeah, if anyone wants to add in at any point, please feel free. Otherwise, we'll kind of chug along and go on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way that the question's phrased is, you know, decentralized bridge. You know, technically speaking, anyone can, you know, if they want to, build or attach Kadena to a permissionless bridge. So, you know, it's not like it can't be done. And obviously, you know, Chainweb and with Pact on top of that, with that interoperability potential, you know, it's definitely doable. And from the grants perspective, you know, we are in advanced conversations with developer teams that have approached us that are very interested in building bridges and, not just EVM, there's other chains out there other than just EVM. So you want to make sure that you can kind of get as much interoperability as possible with each bridge that you get. And just to clarify, it's a big priority, specifically for me and the BD team, at Kadena.
Yeah, and to add from the from my side, as again, I'm not a member of the Kadena staff or team. I'm a developer kind of in the community. So for these questions, I'm purely speaking with no inside knowledge whatsoever. And for me, at least, working on things like the lending protocol, it's definitely like a massive need in order to bring assets from other chains to Kadena for the sake of, if you're going to have this ecosystem where you're trading and you're taking these actions, you need stuff to do beyond like the native platform token. So I definitely understand the reason why people ask about the bridges so often. And I spent some time looking at bridges as part of Sharka. There's like a fake centralized bridge built in as part of it to bring in Ether to the chain. But as I wrote about that and what's in the development guide, you'll see a link to a bunch of different ways in which these bridges have been compromised in other ecosystems. And I don't know, if I can't remember if it was either the most or close to the most amount of money lost due to malfeasance and due to hacks over the course of like 2022, 2021 were bridge hacks. It was over and over again, bridges getting hacked again and again, because you lose some of the guarantees of being within a blockchain, and that safety and that security, it applies within your blockchain. But when you move from ledger to ledger, now you're two, incompatible systems being linked together. And so it does, I respect anybody working on a bridge taking all of the time that they need to make sure that it's as secure as possible, because it is such a high risk thing to do. But it's also so important. So I understand, I'm waiting for it too.
Yep, absolutely. We have a pre-asked question here, maybe from Discord, from Sahal. Kadena doesn't have some basic DeFi infrastructure like stablecoins and lending protocol. How can you tackle this problem within a short time, within a month or two?
Yeah, can I take this one?
Please.
Yeah, so they're obviously aware of the the stablecoin issue, and again, probably in parallel with bridges, or ironically, it's very easy to combine the stablecoin question into the bridge. You get a bridge, and that's where you get your stablecoins from initially. So, and then hopefully the community uses it, generates enough interest, and then suddenly you can be discussing native stablecoins. That kind of slight difference between what would be a bridge stablecoin and what is a native stablecoin. And then on the lending protocol, look, Thomas has put the work in. Someone could deploy a lending protocol, tomorrow, Thomas. I don't know if they wanted to. Technically speaking,
should get an audit, and then however long that takes. Yeah.
But it's possible, and the fantastic, really want to emphasize fantastic work that Thomas has done on the Charter project is really great. We again, referring back to the grants program, we've had, I think, something like 550 grant requests in the last maybe 4 or 5 months, and a portion of these are obviously DeFi related, and there's keen interest from developers to proceed to build a really solid lending protocol on Kadena. So look, I'm never going to get tied down within a month or two, when WEN, but it's definitely something that's being worked on and looked at. And Thomas has written a blueprint, so Sahal, if you want to have a look at the Chaka video, feel free, and we're happy to advise and help. And if you feel like a grant is necessary, we're happy to review that as well.
Right on. And yeah, I'd just also give a plug that there's other teams in the ecosystem working on lending. There's a Callan team. And so I know there's at least 2, if not 3 independent code bases out there for doing lending on Kadena. So I think it's, again, an example where anytime you are stewarding capital, and I use the phrase "you" here in the sort of amorphous, vague, including a smart contract as the "you," but there's risk involved, and there's a huge degree of responsibility. So if you're writing code that's then going to potentially run in a decentralized fashion and protect a pool of assets and provide access to borrowing against it and depositing into it and crediting and all that, there's a huge amount of pressure to get that correct, because even if the functionality is limited and well circumscribed, the repercussions of errors can be very high. And so I think that's why we've seen with swap platforms, for example, that there's been bounty programs that have been successfully run, and there have been bounties that have been seized. For example, when Kadena Swap first launched, there was a bounty that was seized. And those are amazing contributions by the sort of white hat community, by actually going in, finding high value bugs before a launch with a lot of assets, and then helping contribute bug fixes back. And so I think with lending and with stablecoins, it's exactly the same thing. And that's how I would hope that any third party would operate. Of course, we don't have control over that. Projects can move as quickly or slowly as they want with whatever risk tolerance that they feel comfortable taking. And so I think that's where it comes down to individual projects. But let's jump ahead to the next question. It's sort of the same question, so maybe we can mostly skip it. From Secret Superstar: when can we expect an ETH bridge to Kadena? So I think we kind of answered this a little bit, but Nick, I don't know if you want to add any other context or coloration.
I mean, yeah, look, it's it's a priority. It's a priority. We're in active discussions, and there's watch this space is what I can say. It's something that we're really proactively working on and working towards, and we obviously want to make sure, like you mentioned, want to make sure that we pick the best, safest user experience. Kadena's focus on user experience is utmost, right? So we want to make sure we pick the best user experience for people to have when they're bridging assets in or out. And it is, soon to, when equals soon.
All right. And one last pre-asked question from Anon. What are 3 to 5 real-world use case applications for Kadena's blockchain? What are barriers to entry or stopping execution? Maybe we can each give 1 or 2, and that'll get us to that 3 to 5.
Do you want me to go first on this one? I got sent this on Twitter, so
all right.
you.
Yeah, Nick, we'll have you take that on first.
Thank you for the person sending it. And actually, it was a member of, definitely want to give a shout out, Kadena Greece. So big shout out to Kadena Greece, and really, that actually helped me as well when I was joining Kadena. Great source of information and knowledge. Telegram group is fantastic. So, for my one, I'm going to go with an interesting one that I kind of had recently, and it hopefully would solve an issue which is potentially a minor issue, but then has a much larger issue, which it could be applied to. So, pets and microchipping, and especially in Europe, where it's different countries, different legislations, different, like, even though it's one Europe, it's slightly different rules across all the different kind of jurisdictions, and also a bit of an issue with that kind of transfer of maybe the microchips. And so from a blockchain application, pet passports, get your pet passports on a blockchain, and you and your dog can, or your cat or your tortoise or whatever it might be, can go wherever they want to on a trip. And especially with nomad lifestyles, with people traveling, and one of the biggest issues that I hear of why people don't own pets, because they're living in a kind of like nomad journey kind of lifestyle, is getting them around and then having to show documentation, etc. It just feels like a really easy use case of get the data on a ledger, and you've got a real world asset, your chip in the dog that you can verify, and easily verifiable. And as a test case, do it with pets, and then who knows, maybe it would be humans, and like that first kind of proof of concept for human passports to be on chain.
Right on. Well, Thomas, I know you've already built out 1 or 2, but curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I was talking with Nick about this a little bit before the call, and the thing that comes to mind right away is just what we've already been talking about with traditional finance moving to the blockchain. The reason that I am personally so focused on that, and I haven't spent personally much time with other aspects of blockchain technology, is just because of how many intermediaries exist in traditional finance and the amount of friction that is involved in that process. And when I think about large scale unlocking of new value in human history, a lot of times it comes from all of a sudden something that was high friction becomes low friction, and now you're able to invent new use cases maybe that you didn't see before, but you also get to take existing processes and unlock it for a lot more people. So, and sometimes in crypto that gets talked about banking the unbanked, but I'm more thinking about things like, if you do go into one of these lending protocols, the fact that you can just, there are no terms, there are no 7-day holding period, you can just go in and do it, but without the massive problems with counterparty risk and with just the issue of you go through a market crash or something like that, And the fact that traditional institutions, we saw this last year, had a lot of trouble with this. We had a number of bank failures in the United States over the last year. And failures in crypto as well, was such a massive market crash in 2022. But what I was saying to Nick is that these DeFi protocols that are not really like new things, they're traditional finance, just in a new environment. They didn't freeze withdrawals, they didn't fail. Compound finance kept chugging along. Each of these protocols continued acting as a service, acting as infrastructure. Almost like your electricity didn't get shut off. Like you were able to just tap into it when you need it. It's reliable, it's there without fail. That's something that I see as my primary real world use case for blockchain in general that I'm excited about. And then when it comes to Kadena's blockchain, just the fact that, you know, in the transactions happening in Sharka, for example, are a fraction of a cent, in a way that on EVM, it's $40 for me to you know, unstake something. And so anywhere that you see a incredible innovation happening with blockchain technology elsewhere, and you can just apply low fees and scalability to it, is just a perfect match for Kadena. So that keeps me pretty excited.
Great answers, both.
Just to add to that, right? So, you know, look, what the point Thomas is making is really, you know, when you remove counterparties from transactions, you know, what may be considered unnecessary counterparties, you're allowing the parties that are still left behind to retain so much more of a larger, you know, element of the value that is supposed to be creating. So, you know, you decentralize it. You obviously, like Thomas mentioned, reduce your counterparty risk, but also increase value left for the existing parties. So it's a win-win. And you're not trying, you know, blockchain isn't necessarily trying to destroy the concept of traditional lending. You know, it's just trying to make it so much more efficient.
Yeah, and like, just to continue riffing on that, I was kind of browsing around yesterday, and I came across, I wish I could cite the source on this. It was something from McKinsey, looking at finance over the course of 2022. And there was something like 100 billion or 200 billion or something like that involved in lending, people basically earning interest on their digital assets, other people borrowing to cover short-term debts to avoid having to, you know, sell an asset and pay capital gains on it. And there's something like, you know, 100, 200 billion dollars involved in this. And in their analysis, there was less than $1 million that could be identified as bad debt. And that to me is just so striking about decentralized finance, that it's not just that we can take out intermediaries, we can try and like keep more of the rewards of the functioning of this for the participants who are providing the value in the first place, but also just these things, they didn't fail, like they kept working. It seems, at least in many circumstances, to be a more reliable system. So it's not just about retaining more of the profits, more of the revenues, and being faster, but the security aspect is really there. And that's something that I've found again and again so fascinating about these technologies.
Awesome.
Unless you get hacked.
Well, the smart contract guys, just look, I really like this point, because, you know, one aspect of Web3 which comes in for a lot of criticism is, you know, who's making these stupid NFTs that, you know, are up one day and then they crash again the next day, etc. But if you remove the kind of hype element from it, and you try and visualize a world which the NFT is your car or it's your house, and the NFT has an actual legal ownership structure to it, and then you put that into the context of lending, then suddenly, you know, you're not having to have you know, ridiculous amounts of paperwork for housing transfers or housing sales. You know, if you sell a house, you close the loan out, the transfer of ownership happens on chain, etc. You can verify who's owned it. You know, some of these, especially in London, you know, God knows how many properties there are that are owned by you know, non-domiciled businesses, and they sit there, they do nothing, and people try and identify ownership of it. It's really, really hard to. You bring these kinds of transactions and ownership on chain and combine it with the lending, so you get your mortgage against your house, and your house is an NFT. And, you know, we're not trying to do it so that we destroy this trust element with maybe the government or with banking elements of it. We're just trying to make it more efficient, and also hopefully save on like the gas fees. But yeah, look, I know we've taken up a bit of time on this, so I know we've got other questions. Apologies.
All good. Always good to have a conversation going back and forth. Thomas got one for you from Web3. Is Goliath ever going to be an active wallet, or did you build that just to show devs a pathway?
Yeah, it's nothing from Real World Pact is meant to become a real product. I may be interested in developing a real product separate from those implementations, but the point of each of them is to be really minimal to serve as a reference. The point is for someone who is developing a lending protocol or wallet or just a simple contract to, when you get stuck, be like, oh, I can't remember, like, how do I simulate, a blockchain environment in my test suite or something? You're stuck on some technical question that you have somewhere to turn. That's not just toy examples, but it's a fully built out, usable real world thing. So you can turn to that and say, okay, this is how it was done there. I can adapt that for me. So the main purpose I see for it isn't even to learn Pact in the first place necessarily, but more to get you unstuck when you're working on something serious and you just are banging your head against the wall. So no, Goliath is not going to be an active wallet. It's barely a wallet actually in the first place. It's mostly a demonstration of how to use JavaScript to communicate with Chainweb nodes and the Chainweb API. So it's more of a like Kadena JS Pactlang API library demonstration than anything else.
Right on.
All right, we didn't get your real world application of blockchain, Tyler.
Oh, we did.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, I got a few. So first of all, I agree with Thomas in terms of looking at how much of finance is yet to come over, and there's opportunities for. So I think about insurance markets, for example. There's huge swaths of finance and insurance and there's plenty of people that are underinsured or not insured. There's challenges in terms of how do you actually integrate those human systems of claims adjusters onto blockchain. So there's some very real human challenges that aren't technical challenges that I think make that one difficult. But there's domains where maybe you could see insurance first applying to crypto specific applications, like maybe a bridge wants to pay for insurance for their $700 million of assets. And you could imagine that that could be possible if they're paying sufficiently high insurance premiums for someone to take on that risk. So if you want to pay to secure a bridge and get some yield there, but also have your assets protected in some capacity, there'd be some variable insurance rates you could do, like, fractional, like maybe you have 50% backing if you get owned or something like that, more akin to slashing in a bonding or staking program. I think there's applications that come to, honestly, intellectual property and patents. If you want to demonstrate that you were the first to invent something, or the first to describe something, and you want to be able to timestamp in a legitimate way when something was created, being able to timestamp that kind of document or innovation onto the blockchain strikes me as somewhat interesting. I think you can look at, obviously gaming in terms of digital assets and NFTs and evolvable NFTs or different types of actual control and permissioned read-write access to digital properties. I think permissioned access, of course, has been a big one, whether it's an access to forums or memberships, or, you can imagine having a Netflix subscription where instead of having some ruddy, crappy variable password management protection thing that says, hey, we as Netflix will decree that you are abusing your account because your son flew on a trip to Mexico and is now using in Mexico, and now you have to pay us more money. Maybe you could have something that was actually more permission access, where you say, hey, look, there can be one person using this at a time, and we can, exchange the certificate back and forth, and that gives you permission access. Or you could even loan it out and say, look, I'm not going to use it Monday through Friday. I'm only going to use it Friday through Sunday. So maybe you pay for an account and then you actually lend it to someone and by a protocol decree for 5 days a week, and then it reverts back to you. There's all sorts of cool things that you can do around memberships and permission access with blockchain. So I can kind of go on and on. I'm just going off the cuff here, totally improvising, but I think there's a lot of
You've created a secondary market in Netflix accounts on chain.
Yeah. And hey,
Yeah.
Netflix could actually monetize that. They could be like, yo, we know this is happening. We know people are sharing accounts. So rather than trying to prevent it, which is always going to fail, let's monetize it and say, we'll take, a cut of that, lending cost. We're going to take a 20% of the secondary market. But I mean, there's a million ways that you could kind of do this in a creative Web3 way that would make consumers less pissed off. Okay, I got into a little bit of a rant mode there. I got to go back to reading comments now and seeing.
I love you in that rant mode, Tyler. That's really the best.
Oh, man. Okay, let's see here. We have all sorts of stuff here. Thank you, Kobe, for the kind words. I'm catching up on the chat here. Have you approached Tether? I haven't talked to Tether, although I'm guessing someone on the BD team has. I know there's been some conversations with USDC, etc. All right. Yeah, a lot of questions to catch up on. Bam and Boo, I think this question's been answered before. Basically depends on a bridge or someone wrapping assets more directly. Let's see here. So many questions, comments. Let's see here. If anyone has a question while I'm catching up and they want to throw it on, please go ahead. Here we go. That's kind of interesting. From Kobe, in crypto, it's always interesting when people ask what I do and I need to explain my job. What's the one liner you folks have developed to talk about your role in Kadena? Kobe, I hope you don't mind. I might throw in a quick anecdote about you from the ETH Denver conference. I love this story. I think it was ETH Denver, maybe it was Austin. But Kobe was in an elevator and we were, at a crypto convention, and he saw some people wearing some jackets that said mining on them. And he said, "Oh, that is so cool that you're a miner. I would love to hear more about what you're up to. I got some start mining with Bitcoin and Litecoin, and now I do some mining with Kadena, and just a fascinating space. How did you get involved in mining, and where do you think the space is going?" And the guys looked at him and they stared and they mean mugged him, crossed arms, intimidating glares. They said, "No, we do real mining." And it turned out that there was this like Earth mining convention that was happening at the same point in time, and Kobe had stumbled into this elevator with some people that are mining precious metals in the ground and ore and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, sorry, I thought that was a funny little anecdote I couldn't resist sharing. But what's the one line of you folks that developed to talk about your role in Kadena?
Hi, my name's Nick. Cover DeFi in the BD team, but yeah, we're a layer 1 POW. But no, one-liners, I don't know. It's a tough one, but that's really it for a kind of one-liner. But attending the conferences has been fantastic with Kadena, and there's been so much interest, so many different partnership opportunities and things that we're exploring. So a lot of people know Kadena. It's not a name that people sometimes they think it's Cardano. But it's not, and that becomes although both of them are Haskell based, which is why a partnership there would be fantastic. Who knows, but yeah, it's definitely growing the ecosystem for Kadena, and for me myself at least, it's a DeFi focus.
For me, it's I'm not at Kadena, so the question doesn't really come up. But yeah, in general, I just say that I'm developing apps on Chainweb, and people are like, what does that mean? And then it turns into a hell of a lot more than a one-liner.
Right on. Yeah, hard to condense everything into one line. I would typically say something like, "Hey, I'm the tech adoption lead at Kadena Eco. I work closely with builders to onboard the next generation of projects onto Chainweb and to Kadena's blockchain." But yeah, of course, as soon as you say that, there's 5 or 10 questions that could come up that then will launch a 15-minute discussion as opposed to a 30-second blurb. All right. So have a bunch more questions coming in here. What is the status quo on Chainlink Oracle integration? Well, of course, there's a Teller Oracle. that is available, and that's the sort of recommendation right now for Oracle. I'm not familiar with any. I don't have any alpha or beta on Chainlink Oracle or integration. If Nik knows or wants to share something, I'll let him chime in. Otherwise, we'll kind of move on.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've we obviously had a couple of conversations with Chainlink and some other oracles. So it's work in progress. Just to reiterate, bridges, stable coins, really the priority, and that's where Chainlink don't just want to do an integration to send stuff nowhere. There's got to be solid use cases for it. So it's something in the pipeline that will definitely get there eventually.
Right on. Wow, we got a really active chat today. This is freaking awesome. It's really testing the limits of my ability to look at a conversation and the live chat at the same time here. So appreciate this opportunity for personal growth here. One hit a quota. I wonder if collateralized loans using mining NFTs would be a good idea. I mean, that's an awesome question. So maybe I'll direct that at Thomas. Thomas, if you have a NFT that represents some mining, some share of a hash rate pool that has some cash flow associated with it in KDA, how do you think about that in terms of collateral for, a loaning or lending platform?
Yeah, like the big question when using something as collateral is how do you price it relative to the loan that you're taking out? Hence why, oracles have been coming up. Oracles as a way of indicating the price of different assets gives you a way to collateralize a loan in Ether against, collateral in Kadena or something like that. So if you can find a way to value that mining NFT and track it over time, if that value of that NFT is going to change, maybe that can be tied to the amount of Kadena rewards that it is able to issue over the course of a 24-hour period or something like that, then yeah, you could use it. You set those rewards as a way of measuring the price of the asset, and as long as it holds its value as your collateral, you're good to go. And if it drops, then you are at risk of being liquidated, and someone can buy that share of the mining rewards from you in exchange to close out your loan. So it could be done, but that's the big question: is how do you price it?
Yep. How do you price it, and then how do you liquidate if you need to? So if there's a secondary market with outstanding buy orders, it's easier. But if there isn't, then you're relying on future cash flows. Then it could be a long time to liquidate. You have to wait for all of the cash flow to come in.
It's a great first step, though, right? To get to having a yield generating, digital asset and get that market going. And look, Tyler, from my point of view, if you've got a secondary market there, then that's a luxury problem. You're happy to have that secondary market there, and these things will generate interest based on return. Whenever you're looking at any of these DeFi, infrastructure requirements, etc., they need to be plausible from a revenue generating perspective. And I feel like a lot of DeFi projects that have obviously existed in the past, once that initial hype vanishes, what's left? Where's the revenue generation? What are you actually left with, rather than you just being, unfortunately, someone else's exit liquidity?
Yeah. I actually own an NFT in a mining operation in Kadena, and so like it is tied into a particular rewards rate based on the performance of the farm, which is something that you can project over time. And so you do have a way of pricing this asset, and I can transfer it elsewhere if I want. It's mine. And so I could put it as collateral somewhere where you can buy that asset at at a particular price in order to close out my loan. So like Nik said, it is like when you talk about other using other forms of collateral in DeFi other than just other crypto assets that have an established price via an exchange, it is possible to start using these other forms of digital assets, kind of like what you see in the real world, where like the collateral on my mortgage is my house itself. can't do that necessarily with blockchains, but with digital assets, you can start to see that. So when we were talking a little while ago about yet to emerge, like financial applications continuing to come to blockchain that have not yet developed, that are still nascent, other forms of collateral in the form of digital assets is one that is pretty interesting.
Right on. Yeah, we saw a question here from Crypto Borrow. What do you think about the Kadena hashing project? So we don't give specific recommendations or endorsements for projects outside of the grants program, but I'm personally just very excited anytime I see folks that are innovating and playing around with NFTs and fractionalized mining ownership, etc. So cool to see projects working in the space. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. Ron, I'll take
Tyler. Sorry to interrupt everybody. Just on that note, while you're just mentioning projects, I'd like to mention Swarm's Finance as well, because they've done a lot of really, really cool DAO tool infrastructure building. Squeegee, the dev, and Curtis or Curator. I don't want to dox him, but I hope I don't dox him. But yeah, they've done a really whole load of stuff, which is just so anyone can create their own DAO. And from the perspective of then taking that DAO to the next level of then, maybe managing a lending protocol or managing a specific, element of a lending protocol and having it in a decentralized, autonomous way, really important. I always feel like, DeFi should be making small steps often. And from a kind of personal perspective, that's the strategy that I'm taking. And I feel like we're making positive small steps often. So just to give people some insight, because I probably won't be back for a while.
Right on. Saw a question, Ron, this is kind of fun. Tyler, how's your education related and applied to Web3 neuroscience, right? Asking as someone graduating with an MS in econ in 7 weeks. So first of all, huge congrats on the master's in economics. That's an awesome degree and very applicable, I think, to Web3. My undergrad was in applied math and economics, and I found that that's been super, super helpful in understanding Web3. In particular, it's helped me spot projects that seemed legitimate and had good foundations, and also understand when projects did not have good foundations and seem like a Ponzi scheme. So, I remember when I looked at Anchor Protocol and when I looked at Olympus DAO and Wonderland Time, there's phase where people were going crazy about these protocols, about the yield. And, anyone with some understanding of economics that then looks at this yield starts to ask questions like, where is the yield coming from? And what's the basis for this? And, okay, you're using phrases like game theory, but is your game theoretical analysis correct? And you can, very quickly look at that and say, wow, well, actually, no, your game theoretical analysis is completely wrong, because it's a classic prisoner's dilemma where the first person to sell comes out with a lot of money and the last person to sell comes out with nothing. And so actually there's no win-win here. There's no Nash equilibrium of staying in it. There's the opposite. The Nash equilibrium solution is that someone's going to sell because they're heavily incentivized to, and someone's going to get left with nothing. It's the classic thing where if you could, play prisoner's dilemma over and over again and always cooperate, then sure, you're going to be fine. But there's this Nash equilibrium solution, which is different. And so I'd say in terms of, education in general, neuroscience has almost nothing to do with Web3, but it does a lot of education in terms of critical thinking and how to read papers and how to be very analytical in terms of understanding a complex system. And so I think my encouragement to you would be to say, look, that's an awesome education, and looks like you're doing some cool things with Wizards. So using that mindset in terms of those market design tools, in terms of understanding how these supply and demand curves can then inform behavior, and how you can kind of build systems that react and facilitate growth are all very, very valuable skill sets to have, as well as being able to critically evaluate projects and look at claims that are being made and understand if they have a basis in economic reality. So yeah, congrats on the degree, and going to do great things, no doubt. All right. See, we have a couple. Well, this is such a good AMA. I hate to wrap it up almost. But let's see here. Maybe we'll take one last question. I see one from Kadena Ecosystem that's kind of cool. All right, well, we'll do that one in the interest of time. I would love to see a system on Kadena like DigiID made by Digibyte, where you can use your wallet private keys to set up logins for websites and such, instead of this unsafe username/password setup. I do want to take a bite on this interesting topic.
I'm going to leave it
I
to Tom.
definitely, yeah. I definitely think something like that is feasible. I have a friend building like a decentralized alternative to GitHub on, I think, Internet Computer a little while ago, and he ended up deferring all of his authentication to, I think, maybe not the easiest to use, and I don't know how the decision went long term with how easy it was to implement, but deferring all of authentication to a decentralized provider. You connect your wallet, and that's your way in. And there's no reason why that's not possible in Kadena. That might be a question more for the smart wallets as well, to talk about, you know, considerations there and some of the biometric questions that were there earlier. But the idea of like authentication without usernames and passwords and compromising your information in the case that you don't necessarily have a team that's capable of like high security around, you know, the information they're storing on their users. I think it's another one of the things that I think is the most exciting applications of technology here, is being able to use your wallet to avoid giving up that information. So as far as like any predictions on it happening today and anything like that, you know, I don't have anything for you, but there's no reason it's not feasible, and it's something that I could totally see having adoption. So it's something that I would hope for myself, because it offloads such a responsibility as an application developer. It's a massive headache. It's a security nightmare. You know, the compromises do happen regularly. So being able to offload that responsibility of authentication is a big deal.
Right on, right on. So I think that's about all the time we have here today, folks. But thanks everyone for chiming in. It's been an awesome AMA, such great questions and interaction. Nik and Thomas, been a really fun conversation with both of you. And thank you everyone in the community for showing up and engaging. It makes these things so vibrant. And I hope everyone learned a thing or two. I definitely did, just from the speakers and also from some comments in the community. So appreciate everyone tuning in. And until next time, we'll catch you the next campfire.
Cheers. Bye-bye.